Welcome back. Congestion pricing in New York City is coming soon, with the recent Traffic Mobility Review Board meeting confirming that the new tolling will begin in late spring. Bike New York believes congestion pricing provides a unique opportunity to advance New York City's goals for safe streets by building out more comprehensive biking infrastructure. Joining us to tell us more is the Director of Advocacy at Bike New York, Jon Orcutt. Jon, thank you so much for joining us today.
Oh, thanks for having me. It's terrific to be here.
So let's get right into it. What is congestion pricing and how will it work in New York City's central business district?
Well, congestion pricing is a policy that was legislated back in 2018 um, at the state level, and so the MTA is working to implement new tolls where there are free crossings into Manhattan below 60th Street, and also it would implement that charge across the top of the central business district at 60th Street. So basically, today you drive in at the Midtown Tunnel, you pay a big toll. You drive in at the Triborough Bridge, you pay a big toll, but you pay nothing at the Queensboro Bridge or the Manhattan Bridge, for example. And the idea is to equalize that out so that everyone's paying some kind of fee to come into the central business district. And the idea is to A, reduce traffic, and B, raise money for MTA improvements so that less people feel the need to drive.
And so, what are some of the anticipated benefits of congested pricing in terms of like reducing traffic and gridlock in the city? What do those look like?
Well, they all stem from that reduction in traffic, where we've
Hmm.
seen major cities like London or Stockholm, Sweden, do congestion pricing. They've seen big reductions in vehicle flows during the weekdays from like 20 to 25%.
Hmm.
And then you get an additional benefit from that, which is you have street space you could use for other things. And New York has been good over the last 10 years at repurposing streets for a variety of uses and a more fair distribution of space. But you see today, real big increases in cycling stemming from the pandemic, and partly related to the growth of the bike network and city bike. We need more space in some of those bike lanes. The older protected bike lanes in Manhattan, like First and Second Avenue, 8th and Ninth Avenue, they're really crowded now at some parts of the day. And when you throw in e-bikes and the faster speeds that those things move, there's a need for wider bike lanes. The city's responding to that need somewhat now. There's a new bike lane going in on 3rd Avenue and another on 10th Avenue, and those are wider than the ones we've seen. But we need to go back and look at the existing bike lanes that are really serving huge numbers of trips, down through the Manhattan's east side, and leading to the East River bridges. Those are going to be places where more people are going to ride under congestion pricing, and we need to really work on that.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, when it comes to the expected benefits in terms of promoting sustainable transportation, what does that look like?
Well, it means people who are driving in are more inclined to take the subway or commuter rail, or to think about an e-bike for a medium distance trip, or any kind of bike, or maybe they walk in Manhattan more often than they use motorized transportation because it's nicer with less traffic. And the places we've talked about have pedestrianized some parts of town. They've created public space that used to be occupied by cars. So there's a lot of benefits there. One of the problems with all of this so far is that Mayor Adams isn't really participating in this work. The MTA and Governor Hochul have been moving it along and doing a good job of that, and staying strong on the message, even though this is the kind of thing that always generates complaints and controversy. But the mayor hasn't really joined the battle and stepped up and said, yeah, we're gonna use that freed space for the following things. So in that regard, New York is an outlier because those plans were already well announced at this point. We're likely to see congestion pricing in the spring. We should be hearing about those plans from the city at this point. And it's a little unique to New York because we have the transit agency is run, by the MTA and the state, and the streets are run by the mayor and the city.
At the top of this interview, you did mention examples like London and Stockholm. So, drawing examples from them, how have other cities utilized congestion pricing to enhance public transportation and create safer and more bike friendly streets?
Well, London's a good example. It's another world capital that's a capital of finance, and it's roughly the same size of New York in terms of population.
Hmm.
And they have a long history now going back. They did congestion charging in 2003. Um, they completely overhauled their bus system as part of that program with new bus lanes around the central part of the city and a lot more bus service. And so that really changed the bus system in London and built ridership in a way that we really could use in New York. Our bus system was kind of sliding pretty fast in terms of people abandoning it even before COVID, and it's less still now. But with less cars on the street, the bus should be a great way to get around. We could do more things like the 14th Street Busway, which is probably the best, bus route today in the city because there aren't cars in the way of it. But London also is engaged in a long-term effort to make themselves bike-friendly. And one of the things London does that we don't do as well is they don't paint bike lanes, they just build real bike paths. And, we've done some of that coming after the painted bike lanes, but I wish we were going to more robust construction right away with our bike lanes so that they were harder for cars to park in and people just took it more seriously and it was safer for everybody to use.
And speaking of these bike lanes, let's talk a little bit about how biking landscape has evolved in New York City.
Well, bike lanes were kind of an afterthought and kind of grudgingly offered by the city up until 2007. And then Mayor Bloomberg said, we're going to do a sustainability program for the city. He hired a new transportation commissioner, Jeanette Sadekhan, and she came in and said, all right, let's do this for real. So hundreds of miles of new bike lanes were put in. They were connected to each other, so you could actually stay in the bike lanes on a trip. And protected bike lanes were started then too. And since then, that's expanded and moved on and was then augmented in 2013 by introduction of City Bike, which has also continued to grow. During the de Blasio years, the bike lane network was extended quite a bit. We saw good extension of it into Queens, especially the Bronx to some degree. But we still need to connect up the bike lane network, especially the protected bike lanes, much more so than they are today, so that you can do a trip more safely without really exposing yourself to traffic. That's what will get people who are worried about cycling today to come out and use it. And City Bike also expanded dramatically since it was begun in 2013. It's now one of the biggest systems in the world. The mayor recently announced some changes to City Bike with more e-bikes and even more bikes sort of in the network. But he didn't couch it in terms of congestion pricing, which I thought was a missed opportunity because having those bikes readily available, having e-bikes that can go a little longer distance for people, that's a great complement to congestion pricing. Why not take credit for that?
Yeah, of course. And so when it comes to developing a comprehensive biking infrastructure, what are some of the current challenges and opportunities?
Well, the challenges are that the protected bike lanes don't often meet up with other protected bike lanes. And the other biggest challenge is that City DOT does a good job with bike lanes, but nobody else in city government really takes it seriously. So we don't enforce, the fact that you're not supposed to park in a bike lane. So, the city doesn't really measure this, but the Hunter College did a study of this in 2019, and they found, for every mile of protected bike lane, you can expect to find it blocked 6 or 7 times, and that's very ubiquitous. That's very chronic. It's a abiding problem. And it still baffles me that city government does all the work to put in bike lanes, goes through all the debates and fights, but then doesn't keep them safe to ride bikes in, the second week that they've been implemented. So I think that's certainly the biggest challenge. There's a lot of very specific stuff we need in terms of network connections. The mayor has been slowing down the bike program recently and, gave a very strange speech at City DOT last week saying, basically, I'm going to reserve the right to interfere with your projects, which, I've never seen before in 35 years of watching this stuff. And there are like very clear things, like the only route from Queens directly into the central business district is the Queensboro Bridge. And there's a lane set aside, one of the, I don't know, like 11 lanes on that bridge is set aside for cycling and walking, but that's only 12 feet for both bikes and pedestrians. And with the bike boom we've seen during COVID and the long-term increase we've been seeing since 2007 in cycling in the city, that thing is really crowded, and we're seeing bad crashes there because of the crowding. Now, the city has a plan to give another lane to pedestrians so you can separate out the bikes and pedestrians, but they really seem in no hurry to, finish the work that they're doing elsewhere on the bridge so that we can get that. But again, that would be a perfect complement to congestion pricing, more space for bikes on the Queensboro Bridge, the only route into the central business district from Queens, if you're going to ride a bike. We could do that on other bridges too. The Manhattan Bridge bike lane is very busy, but it's only like 9 feet wide. And there was a horrible crash there a couple of months ago. And, the addition of e-bikes and the fact that they go uphill so much faster means that there are real safety issues in these crowded bikeways. And, government's first job is public safety. And Eric Adams says he's the public safety mayor. Let's see some action here.
I hear you 100%. So with that, could you tell us a little bit more about Bike New York's mission and how it empowers New Yorkers through bicycling?
Sure. Bike New York is kind of a full spectrum nonprofit that really tries to address every facet of making the city bike friendly. Famously, we put on the 5-borough bike tour every May, and that's a celebration of riding bikes in the city, and it goes back to the 1970s. And it runs from Lower Manhattan up through the Central Business District into the Bronx, and then doubles back through Queens and Brooklyn to arrive in Staten Island. And that's 40,000 plus people getting to ride in car-free conditions, the kind of thing that gets 40,000 people on bikes. But we use the proceeds from that mainly to operate the country's largest bike education program, whether official government or not. We reach tens of thousands of people with classes on how to ride, how to pick out a bike, how to get kids riding bikes. We do stuff in schools in the same regard. So, we're working to give people those tools so you can ride in traffic and in bike lanes. And we teach people the different kind of environments they're going to encounter when they're on a bike in New York City. But, look, we're facing difficult conditions in the city. Bike fatalities are way up this year. The city isn't really responding to help us. So we can educate people, and my work to help create a bigger bike network, that's all part of it. But we can. It only works if city government is doing, their work to make it safe and make it safer, and to really extend that safety and that ability to get out to all corners of town.
Absolutely. Jon, I want to thank you so much for coming here today and discussing Bike New York and just all the things that we could expect with traffic and transportation this upcoming spring.
My pleasure. Thank you so much.
For more information, you can visit their website at bike.newyorkcity and follow them on social media at Bike New York.